Guys, what's up? Have you ever hit a wall? Now, I don't mean like, oh my gosh, I just bumped into it. Physical wall, though that's probably happened. But have you ever been in a race? Or maybe just saying like in your life, like you're like, I've been chucking along, things were good, I was at a good pace, I was happy, feeling great. Then all of a sudden, boom, I hit that proverbial wall. Now, if you're a runner, you've done any sort of a race, you know what I'm talking about. That point where you're kind of like, man, I was feeling really great, but I've got to this point where, my body is worn out and so is my mind. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was on here and I had made the analogy that at the beginning of the COVID crisis, many of us were feeling like we were at the beginning of a race, that very uncomfortable first mile, which many would think, oh, mile one, that must be fantastic. It's easy. It's really not. You're kind of just finding your pace, warming up, getting into your spot. So many of us now, 4 or 5 weeks out, however long we've been in this, you're feeling good. You're like, okay, I've got my rhythms and routines. I may not love it, but we've all adjusted. Our family, our work, some of our disciplines, all of those types of things. We've kind of found the silver lining perhaps in some of it, and feeling pretty nice. All right. However, maybe recently, and if you're like myself or anybody else that I have been talking to, you may feel like you've actually hit that wall. I think it's really normal. And I'm coming to you today because I want to encourage you. I want to continue on in this analogy of the race analogy that we have here because I think it's helpful. I think it's helpful for us to be able to take something very practical that many of us can understand and apply it into our lives now. So let me start with this, the word endurance, which truly, you are an endurance athlete right now. And I want you to think about that in what you're doing. I know you're like, I'm not an athlete, Claire. I've never ran a day in my life. That's fine. I'm going to still call you an endurance athlete. Let me go ahead and define that word. It is the ability or strength to continue or last despite fatigue, stress, or other adverse conditions. So my question to you is this: do you feel that you are under fatigue, stress, or adverse conditions? Hand raised. Yeah, I do. I bet you do too. But the word endurance means that you are able to withstand that hardship, that you are able to be like, I am taking a beating right now, but I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on trusting. Athletes, part of our training is not so much just the physical. Of course, there's the physical disciplines that we have, but much of it is the mindset. Much of it is how we train our minds, because inevitably we know that there will be a spot, and whether you're a runner or you're in weight training or you're any sort of competitive sports, that is going to try you, that it's going to get to a point where you're going to have to think outside of yourself. My first point, the first tip I have for you to encourage you today is that mindset. I want you to kind of adjust that, and I want you to understand that. I want you to know that it's inevitable for us to hit this spot in the journey in the COVID crisis, to feel a little beat up, to feel a little worn out, to feel like, man, is the end anywhere in sight? And what is this going to look like? And I think that we need to kind of be okay with that. Sometimes we try to numb out on that, or perhaps talk ourselves up. And while I'm all for positive thinking and such, I really think it's important for us to have a healthy mindset. So an athlete knows that. We kind of are like, all right, this is the spot. This is where it's going to change a little bit for us. And so I think that's the first thing I want to encourage you with. The second thing is this: there's a mantra that we often say to ourselves in races, and it's called trust in your training. All right, so it's this ability to kind of turn off the mind a little bit, because you can't really believe what your mind is telling you when your body is starting to fall apart and everything else is around you as well. It plays tricks on you, and that is not to mean to sound something woo-woo. We all know it. We all understand. We've been there before. But you've got to trust in your training. I want you to think back. I want you to take a second and think how maybe has God provided me for this, or prepared me for this season? Is there something in my past that was really hard that I was like, man, why am I doing this? Why am I going through this? But you learned something from it. Is there something from that season that you can carry on into this next season? My guess is the answer is yeah. It's the divorce that you had, or the cancer diagnosis, or the relationship issue, the job change. Those are the things that form and shape us as people. And it's God's grace that he does that for us. And so, maybe sometimes when we're so focused on the pain, when we're running in miles 17 and 18 and 19, and we're just like, oh, it hurts so bad, we forget that actually we've been trained for this. And so I want you to kind of think about that. I also want you to know that old wounds may be starting to appear. You know, I'm a runner, so I get, after so much mileage, like certain parts of my body as I'm getting older, start to hurt a little bit more. So an Achilles, an IT band, I've got something with my QL, my hip, whatever. And, you know, I can kind of get through that, make it feel better. But as I continue to pick up my mileage, as I continue to be a little more beat up in the race or my training, it will reappear as I get more exhausted and as I'm less supported. I want you to think right now in your life, is there something that's starting to reappear? Is there a wound that you're like, oh, I thought I had that one taken care of? But through this process, as you've been a little worn out and worried or distracted, it's kind of starting to reappear in your life. And you know, that's reality. That happens. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you just a human being who needs the Lord. And so I also want you to be aware right now of those wounds that might be coming up into your life. I want you to start praying over those. And you know, what's it like to tend to that? What is it like to try to have the Lord heal that for you? So we want to make sure that we're not like, you know, again, believing everything that we have coming across in our mind. I think we have to be really careful with social media, what we put in front of us. Right now, we are really trying to grab on for lots of different things. And so again, our minds may not be in a steady state to where we can really always believe everything to be true. So again, just awareness in that area. Okay, the final point, which is the most important point, is this. Don't rely on yourselves, rely on God. Now you're like, I am, Claire, I am. I'm praying, I'm trying to, I'm doing online church services and whatever. And that is awesome. What's so easy to do though, is because we're in this crisis and we want some control, is we start to control, is we start to be like, well, let me decide what I should do here. How can I plan? What information can I consume and over-consume to calm my spirit? And instead we end up just becoming these little like robots that rely on ourselves and what we do instead of relying on God. I want to end with this verse that was really encouraging to me that I read last week. It was 2 Corinthians 1 verses 8 and 9, and it's Paul who's speaking here. So Paul says, hey, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts, we felt the sentence of death. We felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. Do you hear that? All those different things, that great pressure, the feeling like I cannot endure this thing. I am despairing my life, my heart. We felt the sentence of death. But here's the big but. This happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. Now, guys, we just got through with Easter. It's all about raising of life, right? It's so important. So let's be people who live this message, who aren't just talking about it, but we're going to walk this out. Imperfectly, yes, but we're going to do this in trust and faith. And we're going to be people who do this in the midst of the COVID crisis and in the next crisis in your life. Our life is a long life. We've got a lot of training going on. We are endurance athletes. And so I want to encourage you today, get yourself back up. Yep, it's going to be a little painful. You've probably hit the wall. Fuel yourself. Get your music on. Get your mind right. Get your people. Listen to the positive encouragement of people around you and keep your eyes focused on the end goal. Rely on the Lord. Hang in there, guys. If you need anything, please feel free to message me. We'll talk to you guys soon.